were we talking about outcomes from the conference?
Yeah, just any takeaways, any interesting conversations, maybe mostly about like Witness, Archivista, or in toto, kind of in that scope, or I mean, generally anything, I guess, as well.
Yeah, obviously, me and John had a talk on Tuesday. The takeaways from that was that the Archivista data provider still needs a bit of work to it, done to it, which I'm going to try and focus on. But also, I think I want to spend a bit of time looking at the OCI attester, as some of the ways that it attests to images seem like could be improved. Particularly multi-arch. And in the demo that we did, we ran the OCI tester, but in order to do that, we needed the image tar locally. And I want to see, it might just be like, that's just a requirement given the way that things currently are. But I want to see if there's ways that we could, ways that we could attest to OCI without needing to pull down the tar after pushing, which might be like a 2-hour or 2-minute investigation to be told that that's not going to work, or someone might have already tried.
Yeah, so I think that OCI tester can definitely be improved, but as far as like some of the design decisions, right? We wanted to have that available locally so we could actually unwrap it and investigate it, rather than trusting some manifest that could have been manipulated. So if we do that, if we do some remote generation, we do it based upon some remote trust, I think that's okay, but we should be explicit in how we do that, right? And say, hey, yeah, this was not locally verified or locally calculated these hashes. We've trusted this remote server to provide us with this information. As long as we're explicit about that, like where the source of this attestation data comes from, I think that's okay. But that would be my only concern.
Yeah, I guess I'm interested in because of course the tricky part is like the diverse different toolings that people use to build container images. Like I was thinking when you build with Docker build, it stores that locally before you push it, of course. So there's ways that you could be able to get that that image tar, I presume, before it's pushed. But how do you've got to reference it by reference. And okay, sure, Witness will know what the command was run if it's handling the command run in that case, but then that's dependent again on the tool that's being used and all the different ways that could be specified, or the reference could be in a config or something like that. So it's a ton of different things. It's not.
Yeah,
it's not
I'm just saying we got to be careful about thinking about who we're trusting when we calculate that.
Yeah, it's only an improvement if it's explicit. Still.
Yeah, exactly.
It's got to be explicit.
Yeah, definitely a gap, and it was a pain point, right? And we had to make a decision about how we were going to create these attestations, right? And we've always been very driven towards these ideas of explicit trust rather than trust some remote server. But yeah, definitely some ways for improvement, then add some flexibility, maybe give the user a little bit more control over deciding what they trust, right? Because if we put that into the attestation, now it's up to the client that is doing the verification, the Witness verify, to say, hey, this is what I expect to happen during the process, right? So the producer can do whatever they want, right? And then it'll be up to the client that's writing the policy to determine whether that's the way they want it or not.
Yeah, I need to spend a bit of time thinking and looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's definitely a good takeaway.
I was just going to add for the Docker build, and when you push, the image does not live on disk afterwards, so it's gone. So there's no product to attest to. And after you push it into, if it's a Docker image, the digest changes after it ends up there. So there's a whole host of OCI problems that could be time consuming. So we should just chat about how deep down that rabbit hole we want to go. Yeah, I think for me, there were a lot of talks about in toto in general. I think there were 8 different things. I'm going to count everything that references salsa is referencing in toto, whether anyone puts in toto in the title or not, because salsa is an in toto attestation. And there were a lot of things related to supply chain security and things in that area. There was a track called Supply Chain Security Con, but still a lot of it was getting started, how to just like do the basic type things, or there's lots of tools, we need to make things easier. And that's definitely like a theme that we've heard pretty consistently. One of the highlights, I think, for me and maybe for Tom was Joe Beta was in our session asking a bunch of questions about Syntoto and attestations and stuff. So that was really cool. He co-created Kubernetes. So if you don't know who Joe Beta is, and yeah, lots of great conversations with folks, good conversations with attestation maintainers. Marcella was there, Aditya was there, Tom Hennon from Google, and other folks. And so I think it was nice just to meet people in person and build those relationships, and hopefully make it easier to get the VSA stuff across the line in another week or so from the spec standpoint. And I think finishing up our implementation there will help as well too. So yeah, I think I don't know if anybody else had anything on that topic.
On the topic of VSAs, or
on the topic of OSS?
Oh yeah, the only other thing I was going to add, it's maybe on the edge of Witness and Archivista, but I think it's still very relevant. So for those of you that don't know, there's a tool inside of OpenVex called VexCTL, which someone from StatClock called Adolfo, or online is known as Puerco, he's one of the lead maintainers of. At a previous conference, I had a conversation with him about trying to like increase the, how do I say this? Like increase the or reduce rather the toil for developers to use a tool like this. And I spoke to him about how I was interested in trying to like add Vex statements into the commit workflow in Git, and then find those, cross-reference them during release time in order to compile a bunch of Vex statements that correlate to one release. So we had some great discussions about it. I hashed out on like a couple of like simple like POC bits of tooling. He's really enthusiastic, but I feel it's also a good opportunity to try and ensure that those Vex statements are created as in toto statements, and hopefully like pushed to Archivista for storage. Yeah, I think that'd be really cool. So I'm interested in trying to get that done. There's also like the notion of like I've got a thought about how like when a GitHub issue is created referencing a CVE on a project, being able to have a bot that looks at Archivista to see if there's like a Vex statement related to that, so that quickly, rather than the developer having to go, please leave me alone, there's a bot that just says, oh, by the way, like there's a Vex statement for this.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a really good way to show that, hey, yeah, you know what, we are increasing developer productivity by increasing security. And those are the types of things that we need to do in order to get more of this implemented, right? Because if I'm an engineering manager, I'm worried about pushing features, right? So I increase revenue. But if we can show that, hey, you can do it the more secure way, and it actually increases developer productivity because of A, B, and C, I think that's a really good way to drive adoption, right?
Yeah, I think it's also like I think it helps people across the board, and that's why I like the idea of Vex if it's done correct, because like I've spoken to so many open source contributors or maintainers that like have pain from people running scanners, getting results, and coming to their repo and filing the 50th issue about this CVE that doesn't affect the repo. And then for engineering managers or those who are end users, they're worried about the CVE that the scanner's talking about, and they'll file an issue and they don't get like a transparent answer. And they're worried about the usage of this dependency or this package inside of their repository. If we can get to the point where like all of this is really transparent in the repositories, then everyone's going to see that, and it's a good advert for attestation and in toto and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, always exciting things. Let's see here. The next thing we had on the agenda, Cairo, was update on the Archivista policy stuff. If you were ready for that.
Yeah, thank you, John. A little bit sick, but just to update folks following the project. So what I did last week, actually, I created the milestones for the coming features. Basically, the policy and the tough integration. And I'm pretty sure that for the next week we'll be finish the policy feature. It means that we'll be able to store policies in Archivista and retrieve them and search for them, of course, in the GraphQL as well. Yeah, and after finishing this, I will start to work in the next feature that will be the tough integration. Of course, this will be really an optional setting in Archivista. We can enable or disable, and it will require, of course, some integration with our stuff that basically will create a documentation with the steps how you use our stuff and how you integrate it to the Archivista to retrieve safely from witness the attestations and policy. This will here is covering Archivista, but will require also some implementation in witness that will be the tough client. So also will be a optional feature to use in witness. But this will be done later. It means that if you want to retrieve some policy using tough or attestation, you will be able to do this using any kind of tough client, as long as you know the Git ID of the policy or attestation that you want to retrieve. Just to share how you can follow the progress of the features. Yeah. Thank you, John.
Awesome. Definitely looking forward to being able to use all those things, and nice to be able to see the progress too. We're getting close. All right. And then Matthias, I moved your thing ahead of the demo just because we'll see how that explodes.
Okay, cool. So I will keep it short. I can share a PR, but basically I've been working on a feature change or an improvement on excluding and including the product output of witness. In our case, we had the problem of a very big monorepo that during its build created so many small files that one way you could say they are not what we want to track because it created like a gigabyte of metadata, which is a bit too much. I'm still talking also with Frederik about Omnibor and seeing if we can still do some kind of tracking, but minimize the amount of data. That will be beneficial. But in this case, I implemented now the changes for tests. The tests are fixed now, and it also has a flag for material. So also the material can do a include and an exclude, which it currently cannot. But if you have two steps after each other, and then in the first step you exclude certain files, but then in the next step you are going to include the files because you don't have that same exclude functionality, you're still going to capture all the data that you first said, well, I don't care about that. So you create a problem. In our case, that creates another problem. First, I'm excluding it, and then in the next step, I'm going to include that data. That doesn't really solve the problem. So I thought that probably this is the best way to do it. But let me know if there's anything that we need to improve on that. It does have the configuration now in it. So the attestation has a version bump from 0.1 to 0.2, because the structure of the witness attestation is going to change a little bit. But now you can make a policy decision if this is what you want. If you want to actually say this type of exclusion is what I agree with or not.
So this is just me thinking aloud, and maybe I need the context of looking at the code a bit. But like, I guess the only disadvantage with like saying to exclude stuff, which again, I think it's valuable to say in the policy that you're okay with that being the case because of this situation, is you still would probably might want to care about making sure that you get some telemetry on those products. And I wonder, like, could it be possible, instead of like excluding those from being referenced altogether, you could have one single hash of all of those products? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just one thing that springs to mind. There might be a reason why this is a terrible idea, but that way, like, I'm not saying that like for the entire predicate we change to that sort of way of doing things, but at least you're just compressing. You're compressing that output into something that's more digestible, but you still get some level of, because I don't know how dynamic those products are from version to version, but you still get something that you can link into the next step. But I'm guessing Aditya will have thoughts about this.
Oh, that was going to be the first part of my answer, and I just dropped the link in the chat. The Intuit attestation spec allows for different mechanisms for hashing artifacts, and one thing that has been implemented over on the legacy Python implementation is the ability to hash over an entire directory recursively. And in the attestation, that just ends up as a single hash, and you can still apply within to an extent artifact rules against them. Like, you can at least state that, hey, the contents of this directory as a whole changed from one step to another. You can't reason about exactly which entry in that directory changed, looking just at the directory hash at step 1 and step 2. But at the very least, you're not completely blind to the fact that your step changed the contents of that directory. So I think that may be one thing to explore. The other thing I was going to talk about is I didn't fully understand the change in the attestation or the predicate schema that you discussed in the context of, like, we want to be able to communicate something was excluded and so on. And I just wanted to note/ask if that was more of a policy aspect rather than an attestation aspect. And I wonder if that actually kind of gets solved automatically with support for all kinds of artifact rules at the witness policy layer. Because my understanding is the witness policy currently has artifacts from, right? Which is essentially like the old, hey, match all the artifacts in this context from this previous step. But the full set of artifact rules allow you to allow something that you may not have seen before within a particular path, and so on and so forth. So I wonder if that can be solved by making this available in the policy layer, so that we don't have data points that are really policy declarations in the attestation itself.
Good point. The option of the first point about the hashing, I don't know. We currently don't have that in Witness, right? To collapse basically into a hash. So that's something that is maybe a limitation, but there are thoughts about implementing Omnivore as a way to capture the whole reference tree, but also have the option to say, well, these files collapse them into the archive, and then everything that is below it, don't take them into the picture, basically.
Would be very cool. Like being able to selectively prune parts of the directory would be very cool. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Yeah, no problem. Where the problem comes into play for us is we have a lot of node modules. So we are building one product in one build step, basically with please build as a build tool, and all those node modules are creating a lot of small files, and then they are stored in a output directory together with a copy of my source code also. So the build tool copies over the source code also. So you get a lot of additional files that you don't need. On the part of the configuration, that was coming out of a conversation I had with Michael or Miko. I don't really know how to pronounce it correctly, but there wasn't a conversation about how do we know what kind of configuration was used for the attester. So witness, if witness gets some kind of input for an attester, then how do we know what kind of configuration was used during this run?
Cole, you may be muted.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right, a couple of things. Yeah, I think there's some improvements that need to be made to the file container. We've done some work with OmniTrail, and there's a branch that implements that, and that solves some of the issues around like, hey, how do we represent a directory so we can do that comparison, see if a directory changes. I think one of the things that we've discussed in this file container is it should say, hey, what directories are we actually tracking? Like what things have we excluded and what things have we included? So I think that's certainly a gap, right? And then within that file container would describe what it has been excluded. I think that solves some of those problems. However, I don't know if Mikhail had a chance to talk to you yet, but he did get the trace from that build, and it seems like it's the Git attester that is causing those slowdowns, and that's because we're using Go Git library, and that library does not support Git LFS. So that's causing some major issues, I think, in your specific use case. So I think that the solution there would be like, how do we support Git LFS, and is Go Git going to be the thing that we need? Is Go Git going to be allow us to do that? I think that would help a lot in the near term. And then I think going forward, it's about this file container, right? And I think if there's a large file that we don't want to hash, we don't want to spend the computational energy hashing that file, let's not do it, right? But let's be very explicit about that in the file container so the user can know, like, hey, yeah, we don't, like, let's say we didn't hash anything in the .git folder, right? That's going to that's okay, but we just need to tell the user that and allow them to apply a policy or whatever that to say, hey, that's something I want, or that's something that's not acceptable. We want hashes for everything. Aditya?
Yeah. So I'm just gathering my thoughts here. I think I have 3 points. In no particular order, I think we want to address the .git folder recording bit on a case-by-case basis, because Git throws a bunch of other things in there that's going to make artifact rules very unhappy very quickly. And some of the time it doesn't quite matter as long as you can confirm that the work tree you have or whatever you've checked out matches what your expected revision is in the context of the Git repository. The second thing was about GoGet. It's a fantastic library, remarkably featureful, but we've run into cases where like it'll really get you 80% of the way, but the last 20% can sometimes leave you wondering if it's worth spending a bunch of cycles putting it in GoGet versus maybe using a Git binary itself. And I'm coming at this from the GitHub perspective right now rather than the in-total perspective.
Well, Go Git said they're not going to support Git LFS. They said no, we're not doing it.
Right.
So
Uh,
when I was sorry,
Go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to add that when doing the Vex stuff, obviously I needed some Git capability, so I started using GoGit. That's why Aditya mentioned it to me, but we didn't have the full conversation. But Go Releaser, that was sort of the tool that I knew was like closest to what I wanted to be able to do. And their source code doesn't use GoGit and rather just passes out to the binary, the Git binary. So it's just something to consider as another option.
Yeah,
But
in fact,
how do we know but how do we know the Git binary is there? That's the one issue, right? It would be dependent on that Git binary being in place.
And I guess like the areas that Witness is being run is a little bit more dynamic than like a Go Releaser or something.
Yeah, that is a problem. I will also note though that GoGit isn't a pure implementation. There are definitely some cases where they also just shell out. So we want to be careful about that. They have a table somewhere in the compatibility document where they say, yeah, we do this feature, but we shell out to Git for some aspects of it. So we want to be careful about that assumption either way.
Yeah, and the last thing we want to do is start the task of writing a new Go Git library.
Oh, yeah.
I never signed up for that.
or we go full Seago and link against libgit too. But
no. Let's not go down. So yeah, I mean, but maybe the Git attester just requires Git to be on the system. I mean, that's not that far of a stretch. But.
Yeah, I see Matthias's hand is up, and I just want to add one last thing about capturing the configuration of Witness in the attestation, which was I think the first point that was made a little while ago. I tend to think that we should not be relying on the attestation for the configuration of how that attestation was produced, but instead we should get data in its relatively, I don't have my camera on, but I have air quotes going on right now, in the relatively raw form, and kind of directly or indirectly set expectations on the configuration used to capture them in the policy layer. For example, rather than say relying on the attestation to say this path was excluded and therefore that is why I have the attestation has not recorded it, we really should be thinking about moving that into, tinkering with the policy actually requires this path to be collected, which is again, one of the artifact rule types, or so on and so forth. And then I think in the long run, this also aids in interoperability and a bunch of other basically some other questions about trust assumptions as to what we're trusting to get what data about how an attestation was produced.
Thanks for that last thought. That's interesting. Maybe we need to have a separate conversation then on how we can. Should we just move it out? I understand the context of what you're saying. Probably it. How would I say that? It does require some level of maturity in building your policies, I think, to be able to make explicit assumptions. But anyway, there was something else I wanted to come back to on the topic of LFS, which is a problem that we have with GoGit. It's easier to have like a site library that checks the Git setup for LFS instead of relying on GoGit. So you can actually just see if this is LFS, then we can run our own validation if those files are LFS based or not, instead of relying on the GoGit library. So without actually trying to implement it, there is a mechanism that you can use to validate if the checkout is modified or unmodified, which is currently what the attester is trying to capture. So without trying to fix it in GoGit. So I think that is an option. and then still you have the data that you need for LFS information. And that's it.
Yeah, I agree conceptually on the policy side. The like, other than the practical difficulties in writing policies generally, like that's a general problem, so it's probably not specific to this. But the other part is like, in that change in expectations from where we are now to the future, how to I don't see a path where we wouldn't allow every previous policy to fail open. Where, like, if you say you must, I'm trying to think. I haven't slept enough, but like, if you in the attester don't know that you excluded a directory, it doesn't exist, you can't tell that there were files in there later on when you want to verify. So you may be writing an explicit policy saying there should be no files in this directory, and there are no files in that directory because you didn't collect them. And so, yeah, that's
the thing is,
big cost.
we don't want an attacker who would possibly control the CI system to be able to leverage that in order to create an attestation that would verify on a system that was expecting something else. Imagine that, hey, you have an open source project and they have this layout that's been specified, right? And this layout's been distributed to a bunch of downstream consumers of that project. So now if we go in and we do a change that does this, right? And now these attestations can be generated, right? Would an attacker be able to use that, right? If they overtook that source code repository and changed some stuff around that, right, to exclude that these files were being seen, right? Now they could put a file in that directory that would be brought in by the build process, and these layouts would now validate downstream, right? Because they've already been distributed. So that's a threat model that I'm looking at that we want to make sure that we avoid. So if that means, in my mental model, it's, hey, in the file containers, be explicit about what directories are being included and excluded. I think that's one way to do it. And that way, I think then that would still cause issues with downstream policy. But yeah, I think we need to think about the threat model here and how these changes affect that policies that are already being enforced downstream.
Yeah, that's. I mean, Cole, you actually put it really well and kind of got at what I was trying to get at earlier. So thank you for that. I am also super sleep deprived. Because I think that what would end up happening is, rather than having our policy be able to make explicit assumptions about what artifacts should be captured and should not be captured, we then just end up having our policy make assumptions of what was excluded or not excluded, and it was like recorded as such in the attestation, which really, in which case I think we might as well go all the way and reason about the artifacts themselves, because we do come into this with the knowledge of, like, we're going to define this contract between the attester. Well, I'm using the word wrong, but the recording of the attestation and the policy definition for that step anyway. So I think we could couple that and not make those trust assumptions.
Yeah, we could also use version numbers, and also when we have tough for distribution of policy, I think we can revoke trust, and it kind of mitigates some of these issues as well. We just don't have those features yet.
Yeah, not too far off, I think.
No, it sounds like it's coming pretty close. It was a good combo, y'all.
That is by far the pieces I'm like most excited about in a lot of this. By the way, like I can't wait to see that land in Archivista to have a lot of cool policy orchestration through TOF come through.
So
Yeah,
one final thought. One final thought. Do I need to change anything in my PR?
Yeah, that's what this is about. Oh, some good bike shedding there. I don't. Hey, John, have you taken a look at his PR yet?
I took a look at the first version. I haven't seen the update yet, but I think between Mikhail and I, we were proposing the changes that were made, and so I'll have to think through everything after sleeping a little bit more about like, for me, I guess the slightly bigger question is just how to handle breaking changes from a policy perspective, and like, what are we? Would this be a breaking change if we change the policy requirements in some way or not? And I wouldn't want this to get merged in to create a whole bunch of attestations that aren't going to work later or would cause problems later. At the same time, like, that's gonna happen at some point. Like, it's just like there's gonna be a new requirement, something else, and so it'll be okay, I think, as long as we know what to do when that happens, like a way to be able to communicate it. Maybe we need. I don't think we have like a tester version captured in the attestation. Oh, I guess we do. We that's in the yeah. So maybe
in the
that's
policy, that's the version. So we might be able to use that. But yeah, hey, let's get some sleep. Let's look at it next week, Matthias. We've been burning the midnight oil at Open Source Summit and collaborating. We'll take a good look at it. Thanks for making the changes on it.
No problem. It's take that sleep. I understand.
The only thing, if I could quickly add, is like I think we should. I don't want to be blocking, and I think the best thing to do is to iterate rather than like do nothing at all. But given we're making a change to the schema of the attester predicate, I think a little bit more. We should put a little bit more thought into whether or not, like, if we're going to introduce any other changes, like what we're saying with like the directory hash. If we're going to introduce that, make sure we introduce that in that schema change rather than like iteratively having, we don't want like a VO.21 of the GoGit. But I don't think there's really a risk of that happening.
And a plugin system would also make some of this stuff easier too, in the future, when some of that stuff gets implemented to test out some of these changes. So hopefully these changes will get easier and easier to make over time. And this is just one of the first times we've run into this, so we're going to be very careful about it.
Yeah. Then I have one question. Aditya, would it be possible for you to send me on Slack a reference to how that that directory hash is done? Maybe if that fits in better with the original implementation, that could also be a direction. Besides Omnivore, then it might fit more into the idea that was already there.
Yeah,
I
just link to the Python implementation of that resolver in the chat here. I can also send it to you on Slack.
Sure, I'll reach out and thank you. Sorry for taking all the time, John. I hope the demo still works out.
Just sent to you, Matthias.
All right, cool. Well, I mean, I can send a recording out of a demo later. We can't have a live interactive conversation later. So that's definitely, I think, more important. Let's see here. Let me try and share. So not everything is working because, that's the way things always go. But I think this is the right thing. Okay. So we have, our historical SWF demo repo. And so we have a bunch of different supply chain steps, our formatting, our testing, our building. This is the save image. This is some of the things that Tom was alluding to. And then we generate some SBOM, CVE scans, and then at the end we have our policy verification. So the big change now from what this was like previously, if we go down to the save image step and the build image step, we can see for the attesters that are listed, now we have this extra salsa attester. And we also have the OCI attester on the save image because of the stuff that Tom was describing not too long ago. The one thing, the one of many things is we're actually creating multiple attestations for each of these jobs now, but we only, we haven't changed the GitHub action to actually print this table for multiple attestations because of the way we're parsing standard out for that. But if we look in here for the build image, and we can see we are doing a witness run with the salsa attester enabled. And then down at the very end, you can see two different things that are stored in Archivista. So one is the salsa attestation by itself. There's should be compatible, and we'll test this. I have no idea if it will work or not. Compatible with the upstream salsa. This implementation is using the protobufs from the Intoto attestation library, and so we should be compatible with everything as we generate these. And the other attestation is the traditional witness collection with the salsa predicate inside of it. And so we have all the other types of information and the salsa predicate. And that was really useful for this verify step at the end because we were able to actually successfully verify the policy against the image that we produced using Archivista. And if we look at the policy quick, I'm maybe hallucinating, but I'm pretty sure I added a check for the salsa provenance in here for the build image or the save image. Okay, but I didn't break it at least. Yes.
Can you build up the site just a little bit? Sorry, I'm on a tiny computer.
Yeah, no. So I guess maybe I haven't, but so this is, I know I did this at some point. Let's try and do it right now. We've got 14 minutes. So we'll do this as Tom and I were reminiscing about TGIK. We'll do this TGIK style and see if we can actually get it to work, because it shouldn't be that hard. And I know I did it at least once locally. So what we need to do now is go to the build and actually download that image that was built, so we can test our policy against it. So if we go to the save, not the save image step, if we come here for our artifacts, and we can download our 2 megabyte container image, not super big. We'll open that up, and let me switch over to my terminal. If I can. And I will also make this bigger and make it not 2/3 of my screen for some reason. All right, so this is our repo here. Just to trigger people on a Friday, we'll go into Emacs and look for our save image step, and we should be able to just add in a new attestation. And just copy the get out of my way Google pop-up thing. The actual salsa, I'm gonna, the actual predicate name. Which is taking me longer to find. Here it is. All right, and so we can
Paul, I saw you talking. I don't know. I don't know if you're on mute. Don't know if you're on
Oh, no, I was just seeing witness policy. It's so easy you can do it with no sleep. So we'll see. We'll see.
Exactly.
Do you just mean V1 there, John? And
Yes. Actually, so let's, I think we can double check. So I downloaded the attestation here, so you can see the run, and Adam already provided some feedback for the output here. Like, we don't actually have for the byproducts on the metadata, like the standard out, standard error, other things like that, which the really nice thing about the way Witness is designed with the collectors, it's going to be trivial to come in here and just do, run a tester dot, standard error and put it in here. There is, as I'm scrolling, I think some opportunities to have more custom builders support, which essentially would know things like, this is a Go build. I can capture extra information about the fact that it's a gold, in the same way that the Salsa builders have a custom builders for each build type. So we could have a Witness builder for Docker builds, a Witness builder for other things. I'm trying to think through if there's a way to do that extensively, so like we don't have to define all of those things and we can let other people define that extra set of information. But then that's like the similar sort of thing of like where the trust boundaries across different things. But if we look here, I did do v1.0 and I think that's not technically accurate. We'll see if that breaks the Salsa verifier. So we're going to look at the policy. All right, so now we should be able to do sign policy, and we have not copied our there's a directory with a no, what does it do? GitHub is super weird. This is just, I'm gonna rant for a second. When when it uploads the artifacts, it puts them in a zip, even if they're like already, and then you have to unzip it to get it's like so many layers of compression and everything else on top of us. Because let's see here. So I downloaded image tar 2 and oh, you know what? All right, so this is a combination of and then Mac OS automatically unzipped it and untarred it. That's why I have an image directory with the actual
Wonderful.
contents of the container image instead of the tar file that I want to be able to verify. So instead, I will and then these wonderful so now we have all right, so we have an image tar now. So we can do I don't think, let me just try here. As I don't think I actually compiled I have a beta release that I haven't installed actually. So we want to go to testify sec, the policy signed, and then the public key, and then the image tar that we just put in there. And I don't know if I re-signed the policy. Did anybody else see if I re-signed the policy before I?
You did. Could you zoom in?
Oh, yes, sorry. This is what happens when I have multiple. But we have verification succeeded. So, and I put some terrible logging in here at some point about trying to see what constraints were being processed, which I will take out.
Or maybe add in some form as debug lines.
Yes,
but-
debug
yeah,
instead of npm.
well done for sticking it out. You yeah, especially low on sleep, you nailed it.
That was impressive.
So I wanted to try one more thing since we have 5 minutes. What could go wrong? I downloaded the actual Salsa verifier. You can brew install Salsa verifier, and so
Verifier supports also provenance v1.
that's a good question. Let's find out. So Salsa verifier, and this has a few different ways to verify things, artifacts, images. So we'll just do artifact, because we have the image tar. And if we do this, we'll verify the artifact, and our provenance path will be saveimage.json, and our artifact is image.tar. We'll try this. I don't know if there's other flags we need or not. Source URI is not set. So this is essentially the parameters you need to build a policy is what it is. So it's saying we're going to validate that the contents of this also build provenance line up with our expectations. And that's a good question of like, where is the source URI even coming from in this perspective? So we have the files themselves. I suppose it's coming from the Fulcio cert, which we don't have directly in it's in the signature of the attestation. And so we should be able to pick something slightly different though, which would be, not sure which one it's going to use. If it's like the, let's see here. We have somewhere in here. We'll just use this. And there's probably a specific digest or maybe something that needs to be passed in there. But oh, interesting. It won't verify because it looks up in Recore.
Oh, that's right.
Is there a?
It's tied to
Ignore.
the GitHub and GC Google Cloud Builders. This also verify has very explicit policy requirements around the builder and the signing contract there. But what we could do, and we don't need to do it now, is just throw it in attestation verifier and see what comes out.
Yeah, and I think that these like rough edges, I'm hoping, I don't know if I'll be able to do it on Monday, demo this to the Salsa group, the maintainers group, and kind of like point these things out of like the tooling that exists is not super functional depending on things that are not even strong opinions. Like it should be totally okay to verify a Salsa provenance that does not exist in a Recore log entry. So yeah,
I know.
it's close.
Yeah, they. I mean, I think if they supported timestamps there on the social verifier, we could do it, right? And then that's keeps it from being opinionated.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we add to the long list of things. It may be more practical for broader adoption to support the 6-store bundle format, which we don't support directly today. But that would give us the same Dizzy. We could use the same Dizzy extension the 6-store folks are using. We would just have the Recore inclusion proof would be empty. And I'm not sure. I guess we would have to have a policy flag or something to basically ignore the inclusion proof.
Yeah, I think there's issues with even that SigStar bundle. There is a couple issues in the Dizzy repository about having support for extensions. And it's my understanding that once that gets through, that I think the SigStar bundle might even change a little bit too, because it would have better support within the Dizzy spec itself. Aditya probably has some more info about that.
Yeah, I was trying to, before Open Source Summit, I was trying to get some movement on that front. And I'm hopeful that in the near term we can start making progress with just getting extensions land in the spec. It was really a question of, it really came down to a final question of should we sign over the extension kind or not? And then I think once we've got an answer to that, I suspect we're not too far off from just hitting that merge button, and then we can rapidly implement it in, well, wherever. But yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it's lots of exciting things. But we're at time, so we want to be respectful of the sleep everybody needs to go get. It's late on a Friday. So thank you everybody for joining. Great conversation. This was a very good call. So
yeah.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you all.
later. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Go and get some
Bye-bye.
sleep, everyone. Bye bye.